So I'll start at the beginning. My girlfriend, 36-year-old, and I have been together for nearly 3 years. We'll refer to her as Janet. I'm divorced. She's separated, working on divorce. We live separately because both our sets of children are established in their schools, and neither of us want to uproot them yet. When we first got together, I got her a job at my dad's business. At first, everything was okay. But then, she started to be at odds with my brother's 36-year-old wife. We'll call her Amy, 36-year-old, who also worked at the company. I think Amy thought Janet was after her position. Not true. She was just enthusiastic about trying to help and wanted to get trained enough to be a full-time employee, and was kind of trying to protect herself. Well, a year later, they fired her. It was a pretty big surprise. No one gave me a heads up, and just one day, she left and came back almost in tears and said she was being let go. I was upset also, but everything was over in a flash, so I couldn't do anything about it. I talked to my dad about it later and asked why he said the company wasn't doing so well, which was true, and they just couldn't afford to pay her. Janet was really upset because she blamed my Amy for it all because she said she kept taking work away from her and refused to give her training that was promised when she was hired. I did see evidence of what she was talking about, but I couldn't force my Amy to train her because I worked in a different department, and while I was on the board of directors on paper, we were a small company, and I really just handled technical aspects of our work. And most decisions came from my dad and Amy. Eventually, the company had to close, and I left the company and went to work for another company. And Janet just increased her hours at her other job. She was working 2 jobs part-time to compensate when she was let go. After all that, Janet never really forgave my dad and Amy for firing her. I don't really blame her for being angry and refused to be around them, but eventually decided she didn't want to be around any of my family. I respected her decision and tried to give her a heads up if they were coming by my place or anything like that, so she would have the option to not visit me if she knew my family was over. We had had talks about how it would affect our relationship, and I said spending time with my family was not a requirement for me to have a relationship with her, especially how they did her with letting her go. I make it clear with everyone that Fridays are always reserved for time with Janet, so I will not do anything family-related on those days, BBQs, birthday parties, etc. I also made it known that she didn't want to be invited to events, give presents, etc. And the rest of my family just let it be, and the only one that still tries to include her in things is my mom, by buying her gifts for Christmas and birthdays. I told my mom this annoys her and that she would rather be left alone, and she's finally stopped buying presents for her and her kids. Recently, I moved from an apartment to a purchased house, and my brother asked if they could use my house for babysitting while I was at work, because they didn't like how dirty, not child-safe my parents' house is. Ever since my youngest niece was born, my sister babysits for my brother Amy when they are at work. She's good with kids and they pay her for her time. My sister said using my house would put my brother at ease about the kids being in a kid-friendly space, and it would save her on driving because I'm a lot closer than my brother is. I didn't see a problem with it because they only needed to do it 2-3 days a week. They would be gone before I got there, and it would give my dog some social time that they wouldn't normally have. I ran that by Janet before we did the babysitting arrangement, and she said it was fine as long as she didn't see them, and it wasn't forever. Well, a few months have gone by since then, and Janet started asking how much longer they are going to be using my house, and I said I had no idea, but no one seemed to mind the arrangement, so no one really thought to bring anything up. Aside from this arrangement with babysitting, I'm pretty low contact with my family. My mom has been wanting more time with my daughter, so I organized a board game night this last Saturday. And then Sunday, I was invited over to my brother's for Amy's birthday. I decided to go because my daughter likes to play with their kids, and usually Janet is okay with things, as long as I'm doing it for my daughter. I hadn't talked to Janet much on Sunday. I often don't because she doesn't want to bother me when she knows I'm doing things with my daughter. Anne was talking to her on the long ride home after dropping my daughter back off at my ex's house. When she heard that I had gone to my brother's for Amy's birthday, she got really upset and said she didn't approve of me spending so much time with my family after what they did to her. I didn't really get a word in edgewise, and she said she was upset and didn't want to talk on the phone anymore, and hung up on me. I understand that she doesn't want to hear about Amy, but I wasn't harping on about the birthday party. In past conversations, we agreed that my family was in the wrong for how they treated her in the company, but my daughter deserves to spend time with them if she wants to. I feel like Janet is going to ask me to go fully no contact with my family, and I just don't think they deserve that. I have talked to some of my family about how they treated her when she worked with them, and my dad admits that they could have handled things better, but that they really did need to let her go from a cash perspective. I left the company some months later because the company started just not getting enough work, and I needed stable income. I talked to him about how Amy did not give any training to Janet and did the opposite of that, and kept taking work away from her when she tried to make herself busy doing things in the company. I even tried to set things up to where she could have trained up in some of my work, but it kept just not working out, not enough work to give her something to train on. My dad admitted that Amy might have done that because she was trying to keep work for herself, but he didn't really know about it until after the fact, and not much can be done about it now. I think he'd be willing to talk to Janet about it, but Janet's pretty stubborn, so I doubt she wants to talk to him. My mom didn't have anything to do with things in the business, but Janet felt she could have reached out to her and apologized when it happened. My mom said she was upset with my dad for how they handled it when she heard about it, but that she never really had a chance to talk to Janet, and then she heard Janet didn't want to talk to any of my family, so she just left it at that. My brother, Amy's husband, pretty much wasn't involved in any of it and doesn't really care, since it has nothing to do with him. My sister is pretty neutral, and generally Janet doesn't have a problem with her or her kids, other than thinking they are a bit lazy. My brother Janet dislikes by association to Amy, and believes he dislikes her. I know he will always side with Amy, so I believe she might not be wrong. However, Janet doesn't hold anything against their kids. I guess I'm just having difficulty thinking about the conversation that will come. I don't think I did anything wrong as I just went to the party, because my mom wanted to see my daughter again, and my daughter wanted to play with her cousins. Maybe in hindsight, I could have checked with Janet before I agreed to go to the birthday party. I didn't see an issue because so far she didn't seem to care as long as I wasn't asking her to be around my family. At the party, I only stayed for 3 hours because I have a long drive to drop my daughter back off, and it was on a school night. I'm just worried that Janet will demand that I not see my family at all to support her feelings, and/or demand that I stop letting my sister babysit at my house. It would inconvenience my sister more if she had to go to my brother's house and I'd lose out on dog sitting 2-3 days a week. My brother and sister have both started to bring their dogs on certain days to play with my dog. And it really helps get her tired as she's a high-energy breed. It just seems like it would suck because the babysitting seems to mutually benefit all parties. Well, except Janet. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I don't understand why you are with this woman. I understand that miscommunication happened. I understand that your father's business was going under, but this woman is blaming your whole family for something they had no control over. What is she going to control next? How much time are you going to spend with your daughter? Why are you speaking to people in general? Why are you playing Mother May I when you don't even live together? It's your damn house. What is she paying for that gives her permission to override your home? Are you 2 or 42? Your daughter is going to resent this woman for cutting out your family over a job. She is acting like a toddler. Comment 2. For goodness sake, why is she so focused on the wrong and not the fact that they were kind enough to extend a job to her and employ her for over a year when they probably shouldn't have, due to financial reasons? The training thing is so pointless because if the company was in a dire enough situation, then I doubt training someone was at the top of anyone's priority list. Training someone for a position that may not have been needed in the first place wasn't going to happen, and nothing will change that. You both should be thanking your father for hiring her when he probably couldn't afford to. Now, for the update, thanks for all the comments on my last post. So, things have escalated since I last wrote. My brother and Amy's use of my house for babysitting turned into a full-blown family daycare. My sister, who was supposed to be temporary, started bringing over her own kids. And before I knew it, my place was overrun with nieces and nephews. Janet was livid when she found out, and honestly, I was too. I felt like my space was being invaded, and my promise to Janet was broken. Then, one day, I came home early to a scene straight out of a nightmare. My dog, who's usually so gentle, had been provoked by one of the kids and bit him. It wasn't serious, but the fallout was immediate and intense. My brother threatened to sue me, despite the fact that his kid had been tormenting my dog for weeks. Amy, of course, took his side, and my sister was caught in the middle, trying to play peacemaker. I was angry, scared, and felt betrayed. I had opened my home to help, and this was how they repaid me? I had to hire a lawyer just in case, and the tension was unbearable. Janet was there for me, but she couldn't hide her "I told you so" attitude, which stung. I felt like I was being punished from all sides. In the midst of this chaos, my daughter's birthday was approaching. I wanted to have a small celebration for her, but Janet refused to attend if it meant interacting with my family. I was torn. I wanted to support Janet, but I also didn't want my daughter to suffer because of adult issues. I ended up hosting a tiny party with just Janet, my daughter, and me. It was bittersweet, knowing the rest of my family was just a few miles away, unaware of the celebration. The lawsuit threat eventually fizzled out, but the damage was done. My relationship with my brother and Amy was strained to the breaking point. My sister apologized for the chaos, but the trust I had in my family was shattered. I felt like I had to choose between my girlfriend and my family, and it was tearing me apart. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Janet did something unthinkable. In a moment of anger and desperation, she reached out to my ex-wife and told her everything that had been happening, including the dog bite incident. She suggested that my home might not be safe for our daughter. My ex, smelling blood in the water, filed for full custody. I was devastated. Janet had gone behind my back, jeopardizing my relationship with my daughter. I felt betrayed, but also understood her fear and frustration. She had been pushed too far, and in her mind, she was protecting my daughter. I couldn't forgive her actions, but I also couldn't lose her. I was weak, desperate, and alone. The custody battle was brutal. I had to prove that my home was safe, that the incident with the dog was an isolated event. Janet stood by me, guilt-ridden, and did everything she could to support me. It was a small comfort, but it meant something. In the end, I managed to keep joint custody, but the whole ordeal had taken its toll. Janet and I were on shaky ground, my family was a mess, and I was emotionally and financially drained. I had to make some hard decisions. I told my brother and Amy that they could no longer use my house for babysitting. I needed to reclaim my space and start repairing the damage done to my life. It's been a rough month, to say the least. I'm trying to find a way forward to rebuild trust with Janet and mend fences with my family, but it's hard. Every day is a reminder of how quickly things can fall apart and how the actions of one person can have such far-reaching consequences. Thanks for reading. My boyfriend shares our bedroom secrets with his mom and cheats on me. So I expose his 2-minute performance to all his friends and watch his world crumble. Obligatory apologies, I'm on mobile. My 30-year-old female new boyfriend of almost 2 months is bad in bed, to say the least. He tries, but he doesn't quite get it. I'm only his second girlfriend, while he's my third boyfriend. He's had casual encounters, but never slept with a partner more than once. So I understand he's not that experienced. The biggest issue I'm having is the lack of foreplay. I've communicated that I need more, and he tries, but he almost seems to think that kissing is enough to get me excited. He also won't perform oral, but wants to receive it often. He says he doesn't like the smell or taste. I won't force him to do what he doesn't like, so I've stopped asking, but I also don't give oral anymore now. Something that sometimes bothers me is how quickly he finishes. Literally done in less than a minute. No joke. He's circumcised too. Honestly, I think it's more so the lack of foreplay coupled with how quickly he finishes that has me the most upset. But how or what resources can I provide for him to help him learn? I've tried teaching him what I like, but I'm honestly not that good at explaining. I'm looking for educational resources, not corn. I really like him and care about him a lot. Except for this one thing, I see no problems in our relationship. But if we can't fix this, I don't see this lasting any longer, and I'm supposed to meet his parents on Easter. Please help. Edit. So I'm getting a lot of dump him responses, and honestly, I'm realizing coming here in the hopes of actual advice and help was wrong. I got maybe 3 people that actually had some helpful tips for us. The rest of you just sound like a nightmare to be in a relationship with. I am not going to dump my boyfriend of 6 weeks because he is inexperienced in intimacy. Maybe I shouldn't have included the comments about oral. Neither of us push or force the other to do things we are not comfortable with. We ask, we try, and if we don't like it, we say that and move on to other things. I will be using the resources that were so helpfully provided by the few people that actually wanted to give advice, and we will be trying some other ideas given to us. I care about this man, and he cares about me. We want to try to make this work before ending things. Maybe if the vast majority of you actually gave people a chance to learn, you wouldn't be so bitter. Try giving people a little more grace in the future. I will not be responding to any more comments. I'm adding this as an extra cause. I'm seeing comments about it. I added in that he is circumcised because I've heard from other men that being circumcised reduces sensitivity. I thought it could possibly be a factor in why he finishes so quickly. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. A part of me understands the dilemma. A few years ago, I would have had the patience to share resources and teach him. But now, I've realized how male-centered intimacy is. And really, I'm tired of how accustomed we have become to being eternally unsatisfied. Life is too short for bad intimacy. He doesn't give oral, wants to receive it, doesn't do foreplay, and is too quick in bed. Girl, you need a lifetime to teach this dude that women's pleasure matters. Cut your losses now, dump him, and find someone better. Comment 2. If he's not, he could try wearing a condom. It would be a little less sensitive, but if he lasts longer, he'll be happier to be better in bed. I think you should mirror back how you want to be treated in bed. I'd play the dominant role for a night and do all the things you'd like him to do. Then he might realize how it could be better. But as a gay guy, this advice could be flawed. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around after my last post. So, I met his parents on Easter, right? It was a disaster. His mom, let's call her Mrs. X. She's one of those who has to control everything. She made a big deal about me not eating meat. I'm a vegetarian, by the way. She kept pushing me to try her famous lamb dish. And when I refused, she acted like I'd slapped her in the face. My boyfriend didn't stand up for me, just sat there like a statue. I felt so alone at that table. A few days later, I found out why he was so quiet. Turns out, he'd been venting to his mom about our bedroom issues. Can you believe that? He told his mom. And she, being the helpful person she is, suggested he see a therapist. But not just any therapist, her best friend, who specializes in intimate counseling. He'd been seeing her behind my back, thinking he could fix everything before I found out. I was furious, not just because he shared our private life, but because he didn't trust me enough to tell me. I felt betrayed, but then he came home one day with this newfound confidence, saying he'd learned all these techniques and was ready to blow my mind. I was skeptical but hopeful. The night came and it was different. Not great, but better. He was trying at least, and I appreciated the effort. But then, the next day I got a call from Mrs. X's friend, the therapist. She wanted to discuss our progress and schedule a joint session. I was stunned. He'd given her my number, and that's when it hit me. He wasn't trying to fix us for us. He was doing it to please his mom. I confronted him, and he didn't see the problem. Said I should be grateful he's trying so hard. I couldn't even look at him. I felt like a project, not a girlfriend. And the worst part, I started to doubt myself, thinking maybe I was the problem for not being more understanding. But then, another bomb dropped. I got a message from an unknown number. It was a woman, claiming she'd been seeing my boyfriend. She'd seen my number on his phone and felt guilty. Said they'd been practicing what he learned in therapy. I was in shock. I didn't want to believe it, but things started to make sense. The late nights, the secrecy, the sudden improvement. I confronted him again, and he denied it at first. But when I showed him the messages, he broke down, admitted everything, said he was scared to lose me and thought he could fix himself before I found out. He begged for forgiveness, promised it was over with her. I didn't know what to do. I was hurt, angry, and confused. I wanted to leave, but part of me still cared for him. I told him I needed time to think, and he agreed to give me space. It's been a week now, and I'm still trying to sort through my feelings. I haven't decided what to do yet, but I know I can't stay with someone who lies and cheats, no matter how much they claim to care. It's a mess, and I'm right in the middle of it. Thanks for reading. My husband ignores my needs and wastes our savings on his ex-GF. So I take control and leave him broke and alone with a baby on the way. This title might sound a bit odd, but I hope it makes sense once I've explained. First, a little bit of info. I'm 30 years old and my husband is 36. We've been married for around 3 years and have a 20-month-old child. I want to preface this by saying I love my husband and he is a great partner and father. I'm not interested in a divorce, but I am interested in hearing other people's opinions about our situation. Thank you for reading. My husband and I are pretty similar when it comes to personality and what we want out of life, which was one of the reasons we decided to get married. But as two individuals, we of course have our differences, which I really don't mind or care about. But for my husband, this seems to be an issue to the point where I feel like I'm being forced into a lifestyle that I'm not happy with. I might be reading too much into things, but let me give some examples. He is a major Apple fan, while I've always been more of a PC person. When I told him this, he almost seemed confused, offended, that I didn't like Apple. When it was time for me to get a new phone, I talked to him about my options and that I was saving up to get a Samsung phone. He insisted he paid for it, despite me telling him that it is okay, and I'll pay for it myself when the time comes. Lo and behold, he gets me the new iPhone for my birthday. I'm sure it was meant as a nice gesture, and I want to make it clear, I wasn't ungrateful or unhappy, just a bit confused as to why he wouldn't just let me have my Samsung. He is big into working out and always has been. I've never been into it at all, which I told him from the get-go, but I always supported him when he wanted new equipment and time to work out. But ever since I met him, he has been trying to get me into working out by nudging me all the time, showing me equipment that could be fun for me to try, buy me random workout stuff that I never asked for, etc. And now I have a treadmill I absolutely hate because I feel forced to use it. In the beginning of our relationship, he told me he was into more fit or toned girls. Cool, fair enough, everyone has their preferences. I've always been petite, 5'2", 110 to 120 pounds, but never particularly toned or muscular. I could tell from the way he would talk about even slightly overweight people that he had a disdain for them and that he found them repulsive. So when I became pregnant, I was terrified of gaining weight and would fear stepping on the scale to see if I've gained anything. Also, postpartum, I was probably the heaviest I've been in my life, but by no means overweight. I was 5'2" and 122 pounds, and ever since, he has engaged in very little intimacy, barely touched me during the day, barely noticed me. That is up until very recently when I started taking Vyvanse for my ADHD, and I lost 20 pounds in a span of 1 month. Instead of checking in with me or being worried, he was suddenly all over me, and now wants to have intimacy all the time. Yesterday, he commented, "Wow, baby, you look even better than before birth. You look so much slimmer." And maybe I am just being overreactive, but I really took offense to that. It's almost as if the thinner I am, the better I look to him, even when I'm losing weight at an unhealthy rate. He only listens to one genre of music. For the sake of not being too specific, I will leave out which one it is. I enjoy several genres and dabble in almost everything. But whenever I put on a genre he doesn't approve of, he goes silent and makes snarky remarks about the singer or the songs, indirectly saying that his genre of music is superior. I'm not that picky when it comes to lifestyle. As long as I'm not starving and can go have fun once in a while, and my son and husband are happy, I'm happy too. But my husband wants to live a pretty expensive life, and he only wants to move into new apartments that have never been used before, and they have to be on the top floor. My husband has some debt he has been paying off and doesn't have the amount of money it takes to pay the deposit for a place like that. So, me wanting to make him happy, I use half of my savings to pay the deposit, although I would much rather just stay where we are and save up for a house. But I guess we are moving now. In addition to this, my husband only wants to live in places in the city. We live in a very expensive city, where all houses and apartments are extremely pricey. I would much rather move away so that I can practice my gardening, which I really enjoy. I have a vast amount of interests and hobbies, and I enjoy doing quite a bit of art and knitting, crocheting. He knows this, but never has he once asked me about it, showed interest in it, or been enthusiastic on my behalf when it comes to it. He very often buys me flowers, which I am very thankful for. But I keep telling him that he can just buy me a skein of yarn, and I would be much happier. Plus, he wouldn't have to spend so much money on expensive flowers. He has never done that. He just keeps buying me expensive flowers. He is an aggressive rollerblader, and he is very good at it. I thought it was really cool when he first showed me, and I would go with him every time he skated with his friends just to cheer him on and hang out. I never showed interest in it myself. I'm terrified of getting hurt. But one of the first things he did was go out and buy me expensive rollerblades too. He never asked me. He never checked if this is something I would like to do. He just did it and expected me to want to do it as well. I hope you get the idea from what I've written, and I hope I do not come across as unappreciative or spoiled. I just feel like I'm not being appreciated for the person that I am, and that he is trying to mold me into this version of myself that he wants me to be. How do I make him understand that I am who I am, and I want to be loved for that? I appreciate any input you have. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You said a lot of words to say, I married someone who has narcissistic traits. I am also in a relationship where I am not heard and walk on eggshells because he has trained me to believe that his opinions and feelings matter more than mine. He has also created a scenario where I have almost no safety net because he forced me to use my money that I have saved for his wants and not a real need. Comment 2. Have you spoken to him directly about most of this? If so, I have bad news. He knows. He understands. He doesn't seem to care. He thinks because he wants you to like something, you ought to. That's the totality of his reasoning. This is unlikely to get better without serious adjustment to reality on his part. Do you think that's likely to occur, or will he sulk? Now for the update. Thanks for the comments on my last post. Here's what's been happening since then. The other day, I found out my husband had been talking to his ex-girlfriend. He said it was nothing, just catching up, but it didn't sit right with me. They were chatting a lot, and he was hiding his phone whenever I came around. I felt betrayed, like our trust was cracking. Then, things got worse. He lost his job. He didn't tell me right away, pretended everything was normal. But the bills started piling up, and I noticed. When I confronted him, he finally spilled the beans. We argued, and he said it was my fault for not supporting him enough. That hurt. I was already dealing with so much, trying to keep our family afloat, and now this. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started looking for a better job, one that would pay enough so we wouldn't have to move into an expensive apartment just to make him happy. I found one, and it felt good to have some control back. But then, my husband did something that changed everything. He took money from our joint account, money I was saving for our child's future, and used it to pay for a weekend getaway with his friends. He said he needed a break from all the stress. I was livid. How could he be so selfish? I couldn't let this go. I had to do something. So I took a bold step. I moved the rest of our savings into a separate account he couldn't touch. I told him we needed to talk about our finances and set some boundaries. He was angry, said I was overreacting, but I stood my ground. The next day, I found out he had been lying about more than just his job. He had a gambling problem. That's where the money had been going all this time. I felt like I didn't even know him anymore. I was scared for our future, for our child. I decided to confront him about his gambling. It was a tough conversation, but it needed to happen. He broke down, admitted he had a problem, and agreed to get the help. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step in the right direction. And then, as if things couldn't get any more complicated, his ex-girlfriend showed up at our door. She was pregnant and claimed it was his. My world shattered. He denied it, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. I didn't know what to believe. I had to think about what was best for me and our child. I told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions, whatever they were. He agreed to a paternity test. The waiting was agonizing, but when the results came back, they were negative. It wasn't his. I was relieved, but the damage to our trust was done. In the aftermath, we started going to couples therapy. It was hard opening up about everything, but it helped us start to rebuild. He's been working on his gambling addiction, and I've been learning to stand up for myself more. Through all of this, I've realized I can't change him, but I can change how I respond to him. I've started setting boundaries and sticking to them. It's not easy, but I'm hopeful that we can get through this, stronger and more honest with each other. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.